to the 1000 Hours Outside podcast. We have today a woman who changed my life, literally changed the lives of our children, Angela Hanscom, founder of Nook, author of Balanced and Barefoot, How Unrestricted Outdoor Play Makes for Strong, Confident, and Capable Children. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Exciting.
Yeah, I love when we've already connected because then I'm less nervous.
Yeah.
Oh, we're already friends. We've already done a couple things online together. So, and I know in our Facebook group, our 1000 Hours Outside Facebook group, people are always thrilled that you're in there. They're like, she's in here. She's in the author. So, this really, you have changed my life with this book. And I always tell people like, this is the must read. This is the must read for parents. So I want to tell about my story, how we ended up with your book, but let me read your bio first. Angela Hanscom is a pediatric occupational therapist and founder of Nook, which focuses on nature-centered developmental programming in New England. But you also have Nook programs I know all over. Angela holds a master's degree in occupational therapy, an undergraduate in kinesiology, the study of movement, with a concentration in health fitness. She specializes in vestibular balance treatment and sensory integration. She is also the author of the book Balanced and Barefoot: How Unrestricted Outdoor Play Makes for Strong, Confident, and Capable Children, which discusses the effects of restricted movement and lack of outdoor playtime and overall sensory development in children. I love that. You just really are impacting families and impacting kids. And so tell me real quick about how many Nook programs there are.
Okay, so we have about, I would say, 40 locations, and we're in 4 countries. So we have 4 or 5 sites in Australia, and then we have one in London. So we at least have one in Europe, and then we have about 5 or 6 sites in Canada, and then the rest are in America.
They're all over the place. I can't wait to talk more about it. My path to your book is sort of part of their whole 1000 Hours Outside. Like, where did it come from? People ask that a lot, where did it come from? And it really stemmed, your book was sort of the foundation for it. When my kids were little, like under 3, we had 3 of them, and I was drowning as a mom. And I know we've talked about this story with your Nook staff before, but I was drowning as a mom, and a friend had told me about Charlotte Mason, who was an educational philosopher in the 1800s. And she talked about kids being outside for 4 to 6 hours a day whenever the weather was tolerable. And that was a number that to me just sounded absurd and, off the wall. And who's actually doing that? Who has time for that? But we tried it. And it's been a decade at this point. We tried it. We went to a local park for 4 hours from 9 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. And we had such a good day. It was the first day I think I had hope as a mom that I was going to survive, the early childhood years, because they're so draining. And, young kids have so many needs, and sometimes it feels just insurmountable. And so we had such a good day that we continued to sort of incorporate these long days outside. And I was only doing it for myself because it's like survival mode. But I noticed real quickly, actually, that our kids were starting to thrive. They weren't getting sick, and they were able to do these more complex things. They were happier. They were sleeping better. And I came across your book, and it put all the pieces into place for me as to what was really happening. And you just go through in detail, but in an interesting way, all of these benefits that kids are getting from when they just play outside. And so it's just this win. So you talk about that, the occupational therapy clinics often have wait lists that go out for a year. Tell us about your path to writing Balanced and Barefoot.
Sure. So yeah, I worked in a number of different settings. So I worked with preemies when they first came home, and I worked in hospital settings, and I've worked in schools, but most of my experience was outpatient therapy clinics. And they're often called sensory gyms. The one I worked in the most was very brightly colored and had a lot of primary colors. They had like a big ball bin, kind of like Chuck E. Cheese, with the plastic balls and swings hanging from the ceiling. And I remember bringing my daughter in one day who her activity level, or we call it arousal level, was pretty, because she's pretty grounded. But when she went in there, she jumped in the ball pit and she's throwing balls around, and her activity level is going up higher and higher. And then actually 2 therapists came in and were like, we should put her through the squeeze machine and calm her down. And so it was really interesting because the environment alone was overwhelming to her. And I thought that was really interesting. As an occupational therapist, we're supposed to be sensory experts. And I thought, interesting that this environment is putting her in an over arousal state. Um, and so just a series of events happened in my life. I just started picking up on that. We had huge wait lists was one of them. So a lot of times, if you talk to an occupational therapist, they have a huge caseload right now, a very big demand, and many of them can't keep up with it, and they can't quite give children what they need. It's like it's very interesting. A half an hour a week is not enough for children to be able to regulate themselves and be able to strengthen their muscles, all that kind of thing. So in one clinic I was working at, they kept hiring more and more occupational therapists, and we were all crowded. We had to like share rooms, and we would go through the book, and it would take, the people were waiting about a year to get in to see us too. So we couldn't, again, meet the demand. Then I saw a child came in to see me. It was a boy, and I remember he didn't like wind in his face. And I remember thinking, well, how do I treat this inside a clinic setting? Because often we're found indoors, occupational therapists,
Right.
and we work on indoor play. We have our swings are inside. We bring a little box of sand indoors. And I kept thinking, what do I do? Get a fan? Do I blow the fan on his face? How do I treat this? A lot of kids not wanting to get dirty, or messy fingers. But the number one issue was that kids were starting to be more and more clumsy. So falling out of their chairs at school is what teachers are starting to report. Running into each other, running into the walls, even, falling off playground equipment. So that was, just very interesting information. And I just kept filing it away, filing it away. Finally, I decided to stay home with my children. I was all done working. I had no plans to be a manager of anything. If it's funny looking at colleagues I talk to, they're like, it's funny that you're running an international company because it's really a small business, but it's an international one, because I didn't even want to be, I just wanted to be an occupational therapist. And that was my dream, and, raise my children. So I had no plans to work. So when I took time off, I joined a mom's group because that was kind of the thing to do at the time. And I overscheduled my own daughter. She was signed up for a million different things, and she was getting very overwhelmed by her schedule. I had nightmares of going in the woods. I was scared to go in the woods because at the time I live in New Hampshire, ticks were becoming a big thing. And I thought, she's going to get Lyme disease. So I had a lot of fears to overcome as well. So it was a very interesting process for me. Then a lot of my daughter's friends needed occupational therapy a lot. I just noticed, like, again, why this rise in this need for therapy? What is going on with children? At the same time, I noticed there wasn't a lot of kids playing outside. We take a shortcut through a neighborhood to get to our property. We live on about 12 acres of land, woodland, and then 50 acres of conservation. And just one day I was cutting through the neighborhood going, where are the kids? I know they live in those houses, but they're never outside. So I thought, I was going to do something to get kids outdoors. I thought it was in the form of nature classes. And so I started with that, and I ran one, and I had a parent come up to me with her son in hand and ask me, why do the leaves, can you tell my son why the leaves change color? And I looked at her and I'm like, okay, I'm not a teacher. I'm not a naturalist or an environmentalist. And really at the time, those were the professions that were running nature type programming. So it really helped me to reflect on, what does occupational therapy have anything to do with outdoor programming in general? And I've I really have come to just realize, even recently, really, it's just really become clear this past year and a half that my mission in life is to bring back the occupation of outdoor play, because it's a really important occupation for children. And that's what my job is. My job is to use the occupation of a child to enhance development. And a lot of us, again, we're indoors. We weren't thinking about the outdoors, but the outdoors, occupation of outdoor play is a really important occupation for children, and it's really at risk in ways I never even realized. And so that's kind of been a journey for me, but that's how this program has started. Then we started doing summer camps because I had a friend in marketing say, I think you'll find parents want to drop their children off more than come with their children. So I was like, okay, I'll do one camp. And she goes, no, you have to do at least 3 to be marketable. And I was like, okay, and I was just going to do it for one summer. And I went to the University of New Hampshire and asked occupational therapy students if they wanted to help me, because I thought, what a great um, opportunity for students to kind of see the outdoors for its therapeutic value. So I took 4 volunteers that first summer. I had no idea what I was getting into, because typically we work one-on-one with the children when we treat a child, or we work in a very small group of kids. We're not used to managing large groups of children. So I didn't know how much work it was. I didn't realize I was starting a business. I was going to do it one summer. So I ran it. It was successful, but after the 3 weeks, I was like, I'm all done. I'm not doing that. I was so tired. It was like putting on a giant event for 3 weeks in a row. So what happened though was I had those students went back to the university and told other OT students, and then I had 14 people ask if they could volunteer at our program for the next year.
At your program that wasn't even a program.
It wasn't a program, right? And then I had 2 teachers reach out that heard about the program. And one was an elementary teacher, and the other one was like a middle school education teacher. He still works with us today, which is interesting. One of the teachers said, wouldn't it be fun if we did stories out in the woods, like 3 little pigs? And she said we could, sit at tables and build a little house out of hay, a little house out of bricks, and a little house out of sticks. And then we can reenact that story. And as a therapist, I was thinking, wait, what if we brought real bricks into the woods and they can pick them up and engage the muscles and senses, and real sticks and bales of hay. So they're living and breathing the story. And she was like, yes. And so that shifted. That first year, I was really, I was entertaining them. I had an adult directed activity outside for them every 30, 45 minutes. And it changed it to be more experiential play opportunities. So really the environment staged to inspire play, but the adults kind of fade into the backdrop, and allow the kids to take the lead. I don't know if you want me to keep going, but it just basically,
interesting.
okay.
I think it's good because I think actually a lot of people might relate to your story and sort of being on the same journey. So yeah, no, keep going.
Okay, so basically every year I said I'd do it one more year, then I'd be all done. But my life journey is I've learned to let go, because in the past I was always focused on what I was going to do. I'm very hyper focused, and then I realized it wasn't about me. And then I needed to get out of the way and just say yes to whatever God was leading me to do. And so that's really a huge part of my journey. And so what happened next was 3 years down the road, after I said yes 3 more times, we released our programs in February, and at 9:00, and at 9:02 we had wait lists for all 4 weeks. And I had parents calling, and I couldn't keep up with it, the demand basically. I had 2 parents call in tears saying, hey, my kid got into your program last year and didn't get in this year. What are you going to do about that? And I was like, I don't know, because I wanted my summers for my children. It wasn't something I didn't want to work. Remember, it wasn't part of my plan. So I also had an occupational therapist and a physical therapist reach out at that time and ask, this is really unique what you're doing for our profession. Do you mind if we replicate? Do you offer some kind of training? Can we replicate your program? And that's when I realized that this was a gift that I needed to share. And so I decided to meet with business mentors because I didn't have business experience, and I started getting mentoring. And now we license a program and we train providers from around the world to offer this philosophy and this program for children. It's often in the woods, but not always. It's in nature. It's away from buildings, and it's different outdoor play experiences that really get kids playing on a higher level. It's very deep. There's a lot of layers to the benefits of this kind of programming, but I didn't really realize until I saw it in action over the years and started seeing, kids change in front of our eyes. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and change quickly. I think
Yeah,
change quickly, it really does something for them. I
yeah,
love what you said about bring back the occupation of outdoor play. It's like it's almost like, you were in sort of a box, right? Which is like dealing one-on-one in small groups indoors as an occupational therapist. And it's like as you opened up your view of the world and your purpose, then your occupational therapy has spread across the globe. And that's really an inspiring story. At
thank you.
what point did you write the book?
Okay, so that's the next part of the story. So basically, around that time, um, there were certain things that were really bothering me. So at the time, I was still doing private treatment outdoors too. So I was running my camps, but I also saw children privately outside. So I took my swings outside, I brought everything out. And I remember working with a child, and I was like, I want you to stand on the swing. And she said, that's dangerous, Miss Angie. And I'm like, huh. And then I'm like, I want you to spin on your swing when you get to school. And she said, okay. So she came back the next week and she said, they won't let me spin on my swing. At school, they've outlawed that basically. And I'm like, huh. So I asked the teacher, that one of the recess monitors, I said, is it true that the kids can't spin anymore on swings? And she said, no, they're not allowed to. In fact, she goes, they can't go on their belly anymore and they have to stay in this upright position. And I was thinking, well, as a therapist, what we do is when we treat a child, we try to get them in a anti-gravity position. We want them to go on their bellies. We want them to go on their side. And we actually want to spin them in all different ways, because there's hair cells in the inner ear and we want those to be stimulated. We want the fluid to move back and forth. And that's actually how, to help a child know where their body is in space and become more and more safe in their environment. So I was really shocked because here we are, therapists, helping children to be safer by moving in all different ways. But in the school, they're keeping them upright, and we're having issues because of that. And so those kind of things kept coming up. There was all sorts of stuff like, playgrounds were changing and all the things that we do for therapists, or would advocate for, were being taken away. The other thing is my daughter turned 5 and she went to kindergarten, and the teacher met with us ahead of time and said, this is not kindergarten like you remember growing up. She said, this is really like first grade. She said, we won't have time to teach your children how to cut with scissors. My husband will pre-cut everything at nighttime, so we don't have to worry about that skill. If they don't if they can't tie their shoes, please put elastic laces on because we don't have time to teach them how to tie their shoes. 5 minutes for snack, she said, but if that gets in the way of curriculum, it will be a working snack. And then she said 15 minutes for recess. And but when it snows, here in New England, there's snow most of the year, school year. She said it will be an indoor recess because we don't have time to get your children changed. So this whole theme of we have no time for developmental skills kept coming up. And so I ended up homeschooling my own children for a couple of years and really being immersed in the programming. I wrote an article called Why Kids Fidget and What We Can Do About It. It was just bothering me, and I had no idea that would go viral, but it did on my blog, and got over 1,000 comments on the Timbernook blog. And that's how the concept of Timbernook went international pretty quickly. It got picked up by the Washington Post, and then that went viral. And they sold world rights to Times of India. Jerusalem Post picked it up, and that's how I was did a TED talk for Johnson and Johnson on their main stage, and that's where the book came about. Was that whole message of we're overly restricting children in ways that they're not designed to do, and it's affecting development in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah. What a story. What a story.
So
Here you said you didn't even, you're trying to stay home and all of these
I just wanted to stay home.
purpose just unfolding. It's
Yeah,
incredible. And this book, I mean, it's so interesting but it's also an easy read. So I think that's a hard combination to find of something that you can put through and it's light and it's encouraging, but you just get so much out of it. Can we talk about a couple of the things that are in the book, Balanced and Barefoot?
absolutely.
So one of the things that you talk about, and this is sort of, I think, a common theme, is um, that risky play in general, kids getting out of the upright position, that this makes them safer in the long run. And so we're kind of headed the wrong direction, right? And
Mhm.
maybe that's a little counterintuitive. That risky play makes us safer in the long run, but we're sort of headed in the wrong direction. So you say in your book, in nature, children learn to take risks, overcome fears, make new friends, regulate emotions, and create imaginary worlds. And I know those are just some of the very few benefits. What are some of would if you were to talk to parents,
Yeah.
or teachers, or caregivers? What are some of the top, two, three, four benefits that parents may not know of just about going outside to play?
Sure. So I think one of the big eye opener ones was something I kind of touched on, but basically, when we overly restrict children, when we keep them in an upright position for most of their day, which is what's happening, right? They're sitting, often being driven from one event to the next. They're sitting in chairs for a majority of the day. They might have sports, but they're still kind of upright. A lot of times, when you're playing soccer, you're getting some movement, but you're still kind of in this upright position. And really, we do want kids to move in ways that make adults gasp, right? So we want them to go upside down. We want them to spin in vigorous ways. Kind of like when we were growing up, right? We would spin till we got dizzy and we get up and do it again. Roll down the hill, climb trees, and we want that head moving all different ways. Again, because we want the fluid to move back and forth to stimulate those hair cells. And what that develops is called your vestibular sense. And what a lot of people don't realize is that sense is key to all the other senses. If that is underdeveloped, so let's say kids are sitting for or only moving once a week, they're just not getting enough vestibular stimulation. So a lot of kids are walking around with underdeveloped vestibular sense, and that helps with knowing where your body is in space, as we talked about before, to walk from point A to point B safely, get on and off playground equipment efficiently, stay in your chair without falling to the ground. But the other thing it does is it helps support all six eye muscles to be able to work as a team. So you might go to the nurse's office and read a visual Snellen eye chart just fine. And so you might have a good visual acuity, but it doesn't mean that you have good visual skills. It doesn't mean that your muscles can work as a team. And that's really important for scanning, for reading, and for writing. So think of the vestibular system also supports the eyes. It's like a tripod to control the eye muscles. Another thing it does is it helps with being able to pay attention. So what it does is it turns a
Wow.
reticular activating system on in the brain. So that's why sometimes you'll see kids fidgeting, is they're trying to ignite that vestibular sense so they can pay attention and tune into the teacher. And they just need plenty of movement so that they can be able to pay attention for long periods of time.
So you've got kids. I mean, I remember this. I remember tipping back on my chair.
Yeah.
I loved
Yep.
that, right? And so actually, the kids are doing these things
Hmm.
really smart. Their bodies are driving them, to do a certain thing to help wake up their brain,
Yep.
to help them to pay better attention. Um, and like you said, would just constantly like sit still. I remember at school, I mean, we love those parallel bars, and we'd hang upside down and swing upside down, back and then flip over. It's all these things. And I didn't do gymnastics, but my friends did gymnastics. But I found that most of the kids could still do that movement. Like hook your little feet over and you just hang and
Yes.
um, So I think as a parent to know that these things that kids are naturally drawn to, no one tells you to do those things, right?
Right.
No one tells you to swing on a tire swing, and no one tells you to hang upside down or to cartwheel. Um, but that kids are instinctively drawn to these movements that are helping them pay attention, that are helping them develop their vestibular sense, and then also, like you said, their other senses that are helping their eyesight.
Yeah.
It's miraculous.
Yeah, it's amazing. The body is amazing. And if you think about, so you're right, the neurological system is designed to seek out what kind of sensory input they need at any given time. So if a child's spinning in circles, it's because they're trying to organize their brain. So it's only when we keep them from always doing that, right? If we're like, stop spinning, you're going to get dizzy, because those are things I hear all the time. Or, get down from that rock, you're going to get hurt. It's when we keep doing that we're not allowing that neurological system to do its work.
Yeah. And this is just one piece of the puzzle. I mean, when I read through your
Oh, yeah.
book, I'm learning about the rods and cones of the eyes. I'm learning about ligaments and how when the terrain is varied, the kids are stretching their ligaments in different ways than if they're just walking across carpet. And so they're less prone to injuries in the long term. And,
Yeah.
so just so many amazing benefits to read about in your book. And I think that parents and caregivers should know them, to know that uh, I always say we can gain more and do less just by going outside,
Yeah.
which is a good thing to know. So okay, so let's flip it then, because you
Yep.
actually start with risks.
Yep.
Your book starts with the risks. You say compromised sensory and motor development can lead to a slew of problems and are quickly becoming an epidemic of grave concern. So it would seem that staying inside would be the safer route. But tell us why it's actually riskier to stay inside.
Yeah, and it goes back to, um, if we constantly keep kids from taking those challenges, then they are not. We call it the just right challenge. So we don't talk much about risky play in the world of occupational therapy as much as some of the. I guess we're not up on the lingo, but we just have a different term for it.
Yeah.
So we call it the just right challenge. So we want them to, let's say their baseline is here, their balance is, they're at this level. We want them to reach the next level. So we want them to constantly challenge that to get to the next developmental level. So if you think of walking indoors, everything's flat, it's really not challenging. After a while, you kind of adapt to that and you don't think about it. But when you're walking outdoors, it's constantly uneven. You're constantly adjusting your muscles and your balance, your vestibular sense to it and everything. So we want that kind of environment. We want novel stimuli constantly, um, gently coming at the child so that they can organize that and make new connections in the brain.
I like that terminology. I
Yeah.
think risky play actually is a turnoff.
Yeah.
Because there are things that are risky and have dire
Everything's,
risk, right?
everything's a risk, right?
But I read about, or maybe I listened to someone that talked about risk assessment is
Mhm.
like this, this instantaneous assessment of how dangerous is it
Yep.
in combination with how likely is it to happen, right? And so, like for young children, you're not going to let them play near water unsupervised because
Right.
it's
Absolutely.
very dangerous and
Right.
also very likely for something to happen. And so, but when we're talking about risky play for children, we're talking about, if they jump off the log that's fallen over and they slip, well, how likely is it to happen? Maybe,
Right.
and how risky is it? Well, they're gonna need a band-aid. I mean, it's not, that dire. And so I like this just right challenge. I think that's
Yeah.
really good terminology. You talk about when children don't experience enough movement opportunities to challenge and strengthen their bones, the load bearing capacity of bones decrease significantly. So that's another risk. I don't know if you know Katie Bowman. She's got
Yes.
a nutritious movement, and she just said recently that osteoporosis is a pediatric disease. That
Oh,
stuff like in
interesting.
life. Wasn't that interesting?
That is
So
interesting.
that's one of the risks. So let's talk about load bearing activities. My midwife used to talk about this, and I thought about it when you talked about bringing in the bricks for the
Mhm.
little pig's house.
Yeah. So, well, I think that Katie Bowman's like in my book, I definitely reference her for that type of work. But the way I look at it as a sensory, expert, I would look at the proprioceptive input that is giving to the child. So when they're picking up heavy bricks or big logs, they're getting nice senses to the joints and the muscles, which is something that they need to be able to know where their limbs are in relation to each other, but also to be able to use how much force to use when playing games with other children. For instance, like when playing games like tag, what's happening is a lot of kids are now hitting with too much force. And some schools are actually banning tag, saying, fine, they're getting too aggressive. Let's take away tag, without really understanding why that is happening in the first place. And the way we treat that for children is a lot of, and we call it heavy work. And so we will recommend a lot of push pull activities, or, like farm chores, picking up bales of hay, all of digging in the dirt for hours. All of that, again, helps stimulate the joints and the muscles. And it also helps with stuff like being able to pick up a baby chick and not squeeze it to death, or like being able to write with a pencil without breaking the lead over and over. But that's a sense that, again, and a lot of people aren't necessarily thinking of. It's called, again, the proprioceptive sense. So we do want to provide plenty of outdoor play so they're getting enough proprioceptive input to develop those senses properly. I'm very concerned actually with the state of childhood in general right now. And I guess I didn't really understand how bad it was till I started observing. Like I'm actually volunteering for doing a health class right now at a school, and it's just like during I think the pandemic in some ways made things even worse, because a lot of these kids are on screens, and for the majority of the day. And I remember asking them to do one screen-free day, and you thought like I would have taken away like their life. They're like, what? I can't do that. But if you think about it, if they're on electronics most of the time, they're just pushing buttons with their thumbs or texting, they're not getting that heavy work that they need. And so that sense is bound to be affected. And we're bound to see kids go up and be more aggressive when they play with other children and tackle them, and not know their own strength, not be able to regulate that force as well, if that
And it's
makes sense.
something I actually had never heard these other senses before.
Yeah.
I learned them from your book.
Okay, good.
So, I only knew of the 5 that I learned in
Yeah,
school,
right.
and I didn't know that there were these other ones, and so it's something that I've thought of over the years since we've been outside, is that nature, through the seasons, provides these different opportunities for heavy work. So, for example, in the winter, and we're in Michigan, so we got snow like you do. I mean, these kids are making the snowmen, right? And they're
Yeah.
pushing these huge things of snow, and then they're lifting it up onto the next one, and then they lift one up there. And this is something that young children love to do. Um, and and then here it's fall, right? As we're recording this. And so I've got kids, we go to the pumpkin patch, and they want to try and lift up the heaviest pumpkin. So once again, it's this theme that we don't even have to instruct them to do these things.
Just
Um,
provide the opportunity.
provides.
Yeah.
Yeah. Year round for these different things. One of the
Uh,
things you wrote in your book was and you talked about this with your daughter, as academic demands on children increase, many children are asked to take a seat. They aren't sitting for just a brief period, followed by lots of rich opportunities to learn through hands on experiences. On the contrary, the majority of children are expected to sit for hours every day. This lack of movement, combined with an relenting sitting routine, is wreaking havoc on children's minds and bodies. I mean, that's a huge statement. I mean, I think you talk about stamina, you talk about immune system, you talk about posture, you talk about the eyesight.
yeah.
Um,
And even like another thing that we see is a really big issue, that's related to that, is that children aren't They're so used to, right, being restricted body wise, but they're also restricted in being with ideas because they're used to adult directed activities. Everything's always done for them. Everything's like almost
It's
too,
already cut. It's
it's
already
too,
cut, like you
it's
said,
too
right?
easy, right? Pre-cut. Everything is too easy for them. And so it takes away that challenge that we were talking about, even for the mind. So a lot of kids are having trouble initiating a play idea and executing that play. And so one thing at Timbernook that we think about all the time is like our job is not to give them ideas, is to inspire. Like it's everything staged, but it's they have to come up with a play idea. So and that's called an executive functioning skill. So a higher level thinking skill. And but if you think about, they don't have a lot of opportunity to do that. Besides recess, which is really short, often they don't have an ideal environment to practice different play schemes and dive deep into the play, and also have to be mentally flexible with other people's ideas, and regulate emotions when they deal with conflict, and all sorts of stuff that they're getting that
All the things that you could, if they would translate to the boardroom. Can you
yes.
be assertive, but not too assertive? Can you make sure that you own your voice, you have a voice, but also that you can be flexible with others' ideas. And I mean, this has challenged me to take a step back and see what's really going on, and then really just being in awe of how children can enter into these play experiences and come up with something out of nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
how many of us can do that, right? I mean, this is really truly
Yeah.
miraculous what the kids can do. I know you say at Timbernook, we are not in the business of entertaining children. It's boredom is beneficial, right?
Yep. Yep.
So
We do
let's
that all.
talk. Yeah. Well, one of the things you say that I've actually talked to a lot of people about is you say it takes an average of 45 minutes for children to find out who they're going to play with, decide what they're going to play, and finally come up with a play scheme. So I
Yes.
think that 45 minutes is something that's really important to talk about,
Yeah.
especially if recess is 15 minutes, right?
Yeah. So it does. It just takes time to figure out, yeah, what am I going to play? Who am I going to play with? And then actually dive into that play scheme. In the beginning, when we first started doing Timbernook, it was almost clockwork. I remember going like, oh, there's the 45-minute mark. And when we start a new Timbernook program, it's very similar. It just takes time because they're very novel at playing like that. However, after doing Timbernook many years, a lot of these kids come back and they already are very creative. They've had much experience. And so they are part of the environment for other kids, and they inspire those new children to play at a quicker level. So it's very interesting. Our Friday group this year is very new at playing. I don't know if we have, they're just very new. And so it took an hour and a half, like the first 2 weeks. And I was like, whoa, this is a really long, which is fine. But it took an hour and a half. It was a lot of exploratory type play. And they would kept checking in with the adults, which is very interesting. Like, what do we do now? One little boy had a watch, and he was going, what time is it? My lunchtime is at 12 o'clock. So he couldn't be flexible with the idea of time, which was really interesting.
Yeah.
So we recommended he don't bring a watch to Timbernook.
Yeah.
That they have no sense of time, because we want them to be away from what's happening in the world. We want them to just dive into their play world and not worry about time. So that was really interesting. But yeah, recess is, it's just not enough time. If it's 15, 20 minutes, you're just figuring out who am I going to play with, and then the bell rings. So yeah, they get very frustrated. And
And I think that 45 minutes is important to know because a lot of people, they message me and they say, my kid's not playing, or
right.
what do I do? And like sometimes you just have to wait it
Yeah.
out, and just have little things that you say. Like I say to our kids, I trust you'll find something to do.
Yep.
Just
Oh,
little things, you'll figure it out. It's
yep.
okay to be bored. I mean, all these types of little things that are diffusing, and it doesn't make it into a big deal, but to have in our mind that it might take a little while for them to figure it out, and that's okay and that's normal. I've got a couple sentences here. You say, this has been part of my journey. As adults, we may feel that we always know what is best for our children. A child's neurological system begs to differ. Children with healthy neurological systems naturally seek out the sensory input they need on their own. They determine how much, how fast, and how high works for them at any given time. They do this without even thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That can give parents just a lot of confidence. I like that you said executive That's like a buzzword. That
Yeah.
makes me feel like, okay, I should let my kids do imaginative play, right? Because we want their executive
Yeah.
functioning, you know, to be high, to be top notch. Um, you talk about gifts for our children. So you say, I discovered that movement through active free play, particularly in the outdoors, is absolutely the most beneficial gift we as parents, teachers, and caregivers can bestow on our children to ensure healthy bodies, creative minds, academic success, emotional stability, and strong social skills. So we're coming into the holiday season. We're coming into the season of gifts. I don't know if we really view time as a gift, time and space. But let's talk about this. I mean, how long do these benefits of unsupervised, unrestricted play last?
Oh my gosh, that's yeah, it's such a loaded question, but I think that even just one experience, each experience adds on to the child's memories, their confidence with their bodies and playing with other children. I think it's invaluable. Again, I know I keep saying this, but it's more important than ever that children do this. I have a quick story to tell you. Just a
Yeah,
recent one. We had a I actually brought my 16-year-old daughter to the doctors for her normal physical, and the doctors had two questions were about joy. And she's like, "Do you find joy every day?" Yes. And it was another question about joy, and I wish I remembered. But she looked at her and she said, "You're one of the only children that have answered yes to both those questions because children are struggling with joy right now." And so for me, this has become more than just a physical piece, but that children just need space away from what's happening in the world. And they need to be children, they need to play. It's a layer of protection around them, almost like a refuge, but and it will bring them, we need to allow them to be joyful and to just, have fun and to laugh, and to not worry about anything. And so I think it's a huge gift right now to make sure that your children have some time to play every day. It's really important for mental health right now. So like I feel like we're looking at the hierarchy of needs, and like we're kind of here, like this is a lifeline for kids, but then you're getting all the other benefits we talked about too, like on top of that.
right. I mean, that is sort of the thing. I mean, my journey was that our time outside started out because I was drowning.
Yeah,
I needed help, and
right,
it helped me
yeah,
be present, and it helped me be hopeful, and it helped me be
right.
filled with life and just to cope. But then I learned, okay, well, no one's getting sick. This is good,
Yeah.
and then I picked up your book, and I'm like, it's thing, and then there's I've got a stack of books at this point that just
Yeah,
talk about the enhancement of cognitive development, and you just go through, and then you talk about, like you said, joy and the emotional state and wonder and imagination, and
mhm,
the list just really goes on and on and on from something that's so simple,
yeah,
right? But it is hard too. It's hard too because it's hard to carve the time for it.
yeah,
It's hard to go against the grain of more adult directed activities. That's what we were doing, the same thing as you.
yeah,
And we were picking all the things that were directed, and I mean, we're all like dying inside, even though they were good things.
yeah,
Oh, it was a lot. And so I think it is hard to go against that culture when, maybe the other kid is in French class and tuba lessons and swim and gymnastics and church activities and, tutoring,
yeah,
and then you don't do anything, we're just going to go on a hike. It seems
absolutely.
irresponsible.
Yeah. It's so funny because it's like we almost I keep it picturing like a rope, and how like we kind of make a mess of things by overcomplicating it. And we just need to like let go and allow it to be more simple. Because it's the answer is really simple. Um, but yeah, it takes a process of letting go of our expectations, letting go of our fears, letting go of all of that, and just allowing that time and space to happen, and just kind of prioritizing that.
you know what? It's humbling.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I think a little bit. We had let me tell you a story. Well, we were homeschooling, and so, you know, we have a lot of time. We have extra time for play, which is one of the benefits. There's a
That's right.
lot of you have more time. And, so but my kids so we don't the schoolwork does not take up that much time. It's a couple hours, depending on the day. But my kids, they complain about it, you know? They're like, "Ah!" So I'm constantly like, "Look, like, did you see the bus? It came at 8, it's not coming back till 4:45. You would be having hours and hours. You'd have homework." So I'm just like this broken record, Angela. Just saying the same thing over and over. So one day I was like, "Here's the deal. We're gonna do a full school day. I'm getting you up. You're going to sit on the couch. We're going to pretend like that's the bus ride. We're going to do work. I'm going to give you your 15-minute recess. We're going to do it like how school seems to be structured these days." And of course, the kids didn't really like it, but it was really eye opening to me because by noon, so we're only a couple hours in, they started to say, "What do we do next? What do we
Oh,
do next?"
yeah.
Like, "Oh, wow."
Yeah.
Like, really lost their sense of autonomy, and, um, so it was eye-opening to me because I saw that the gift of unfilled time helps them to learn how to manage their own time and to
Yes.
manage their own lives and, to find the things that bring them joy and make them tick, and
Yes.
so it's funny sometimes we try and give lessons to our kids, and then we're the ones that get the main lessons.
Oh, definitely.
Alright, okay, let's talk about time. So here's the thing. I would say that one of the things that, went viral for me was your thing. I took a picture of the one you page of your book, or I made a graphic. How much active play is enough? So look at my book. Actually, this is like where it opens to is this page. It's
Right.
like creased there because I had heard it from this Charlotte Mason from the 1800s, but hadn't heard it again until your book, and now I'm seeing it pop up other places. But you say children should be getting active daily movement experiences throughout the day in order to develop strong and healthy muscular. I can't say that word. Musculoskeletal and sensory systems.
Yeah.
Lays the groundwork for higher level mental and physical skills as children age. Okay, so here's it. Ideally, kids of all ages should get at least 3 hours of free play outdoors a day. And then you have this chart. Infants should be playing throughout the day. Toddlers could benefit from 5 to 8 hours worth of active play, preferably outdoors. Preschoolers, 5 to 8 hours. School age, which is ages 5 to 13, 4 to 5 hours of physical activity and outdoor play. And adolescents, which this is a big deal because people ask me about teens all the time, but you're still saying 3 to 4 hours a day they could benefit from physical activity. And um, so what would you say to the majority of people who, including myself at the beginning, would think that this amount of time to move around freely is kind of absurd or outlandish?
Good question. So the first thing I do when I speak to an audience is usually ask them. I don't tell them that they need to spend 3 hours outdoors. I ask them, think about your childhood and think about a typical elementary day. How much time do you feel like you spent outside playing, not in sports? Think about, did you walk to school? Did you walk home from school? How long was your recess session? And then how long did you have to play afterwards? And give me a
Okay,
total,
I'm going to do
total
it.
hours. Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Walked a mile. So
Walk
what that
around.
took 30 minutes.
Yep.
I don't know. We walked a mile to and from. And then we had morning recess, which was I mean, it was at least 45 minutes. Might have
Yeah.
been an hour, right? Because I remember we would really play. We had lunch recess, which was also long, and afternoon recess, and we walked home. And then when my dad got home from work, he'd always play ball with us in the street. We'd play catch, and so I would say hours.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and the typical response I get is about 4 to 5 hours of outdoor play. They got, digging in the dirt, building dams, and then I ask them, now think of a child today. It could be a child, your child, it could be a child you work with, and think about, do they walk to school? Do they walk home from school? How long is their recess session? How long do they have afterwards? And give me a total amount of outdoor play time they have. So not counting sports. And the average response is about 45 minutes to an hour and a half. The research was like is about 48 minutes. I think it's less now, to be
I read,
I think it's less.
Scott Stanton had in his book, and it's from the National Wildlife Federation. His says 4 to 7 minutes.
What? Yeah,
What I think that's coming from is that for free play outdoors. So I think what's happening is that maybe kids are getting a half hour or 45 minutes once a week,
yeah.
to really have their own time. That's theirs where it's not directed by someone else, just, a few times a week for a short period of
That's
time.
crazy because, and then I say, if you think about it, if you change the environment that drastically, where they were, moving around, building forts together to, if you're, it's 4 to 7 minutes, holy cow, that's a huge change in the amount of engagement they're getting in the movement of their body, engagement of senses, all of that. And so it's bound to affect child development. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, we're seeing a rise in therapies. We're seeing all sorts of issues. And so we're at the point where I was taught as a healthcare provider to do no harm. We're at the point where if we do nothing, we're going to do harm. And so we really do need to prioritize restoring. This is not even like, I remember people saying, are you a progressive because you're doing something so innovative? I'm like, no, if you really think about it, I'm not. I'm just restoring and protecting their right for outdoor play. I'm just
like moving backwards.
Yeah, I'm really just bringing back like what we did in the past. It's restoration of outdoor play, of something that we had, but we've lost, really. And if we realize that we're at the point where we're doing harm, that's pretty powerful. And we need to do something.
One of the practical ideas you have in your book that I hadn't read other places, I've not read, you say to schedule all day play dates, allow for plenty of time to get bored, eat meals together, explore, imagine, and create new play opportunities. So I thought that was a really neat takeaway that parents could do, just to kind of stop having things be 2 hours or 90 minutes or, let them go play all day and experience all
Absolutely.
those different parts of childhood. Let's end with let's end with this concept of simplicity. Since you were just talking about that, yeah, you say simply moving about in a sensory-rich yet soothing environment is more than adequate for developing muscles naturally. And you talk about that there's really no need for formal exercises. That kind of what children do on their own. Ordinary play experiences give them the vestibular input that they need, like going upside down on the monkey bars, rolling down hills, dancing until their little hearts are content. How can such a simple thing be so impactful?
It's so interesting because I think I had the perspective of like working in a clinic and again working on the senses, but I was given like a little box of sand, and then I started watching kids in giant mud puddles. And as a therapist, we are trained to analyze the therapeutic benefits. We go down everything from every single muscle of the hand to balance to eye, everything. And I was like, in the mud puddles, like it's just so much richer. So they're both considered a sensory experience, right? But if we truly want to provide a sensory experience that's designed to actually create change in the child, I always ask, well, which one's going to better meet that need? And everyone always says the mud puddles because it's a full body engagement. You're walking on uneven ground. You got the smells, you've got the wind, you've got real frogs that you can catch versus maybe plastic frogs in a little sandbox. It's a meaningful child directed experience. There's choice. The child can choose who they're going to play with, what they're going to do. Um, and that reduces anxiety levels for kids that have sensory issues. And it's just a real environment. So if they actually gain skill in that environment, it's more likely to generalize into another real environment versus this plastic environment where it might not necessarily generalize over.
I love that. I have this one last quote here. It just says, "Children don't need to sit in order to learn." That's like one that would be good to put on our fridge, right?
Perfect.
Children don't need to sit in order to learn. And so I am not exaggerating when I say your book changed my life. And when I say if there was one book that parents should read, it should be this one, Balanced and Barefoot. If people are wanting to find out more about you and about your book and about Timber Nook, if they're interested in joining or starting one, where can people go to find information?
So they can find us at timbernook.com, and they can email. There's an email on there as well, and a phone if they want to call us. But yeah, they can watch us on the website. There's all different locations, so they can push on locations to see if there's one near them as well. The other thing is on Facebook, if they want to follow us to kind of hear the connections
Right.
between outdoor play and the neuroscience behind it. And any research, that's latest research is usually on there. So that's Timber Nook on Facebook as well.
Yeah. And your book's on Amazon, your book's everywhere. So definitely one that's worth reading, worth giving as a gift, I think, throw it in with a baby shower present,
Yeah,
right?
start early.
Because it really does start really young. Can we end with a favorite outdoor childhood memory of yours?
Oh yes. So I remember I had my best friend lived right behind me. So we lived like in this kind of interesting neighborhood where we had a fence, and I would pull the string to get to her house. But we'd go on different adventures. And I remember one time we went to a yard sale and bought old curtains and like silverware and like cups and plates and stuff. And then we biked to the park, which was a couple miles away, and brought food, and we made a picnic and had like our own picnic lunch. That was kind of a sweet moment.
That's really special. It was all on your own and autonomous oh, I mean, you can just think what a joy. Even adults like to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, Ange, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Thanks for all you're doing to inspire parents and teachers and caregivers to, to roll it back a little bit and really to find the joy and the benefits of all the simple things.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.